Why aren't you saluting the general?" The officer's voice cut through the assembly hall like a blade through silk. At the back of the room, a young woman stood still, arms at her sides, back straight, posture textbook perfect. But her hand remained down. She didn't salute. Heads turned, whispers rippled across the crowd. Who does she think she is? She's not saluting. Show some respect. General Gregory, decorated war hero, 3 combat tours, a legend in every training manual, paused mid-stride. He turned, curious now, stepping through the ranks toward the woman who had broken formation. She didn't flinch. She didn't blink. Her voice came low, but it struck the air with the clarity of a bell. "You left my unit to die, sir." Silence fell. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that feels like the earth has stopped spinning. The woman's name was Jade Nguyen, 29, petite, composed, always seen in the background at Base Bravo, usually wearing a standard-issue tech support uniform. No rank insignia, no fanfare. Most barely registered her presence. Some thought she was just a contractor. Recruits sometimes whispered about the ghost in the back room. She never corrected them. She calibrated targeting systems before sunrise, cleaned the firing range, ran ammo inventories, repaired radios and communication lines, logged every training bullet and wargame report. She was always early, always efficient, always invisible. But the few who paid close attention noticed things. The way she didn't flinch when gunfire erupted during drills, how she handled weapons with the ease of muscle memory, how she spoke with eerie precision about field frequencies and ballistics, how she never panicked under pressure. Still, no one asked questions. Until today. Today, General Gregory had come to give a motivational speech, a ceremonial visit. Every soldier and civilian staff member had been ordered to assemble and salute. Everyone complied, except her. A lieutenant had snapped at her, "Civilian or not, stand at attention." She didn't move. So the general himself approached, his voice level but commanding. "Is there a problem, specialist?" And that's when she dropped the thunderbolt. "You left my unit to die, sir." The room froze. Gregory's brow furrowed. "I don't recognize you. What unit are you referring to?" Her answer came like a hammer. "Raven 12, Firebase Red Echo, October 15th, 2016. The words landed like a rock dropped in still water. The officers nearby stiffened. Some looked away. One major went completely pale. A young aide whispered urgently into the general's ear, but Gregory raised a hand and shook him off. "I don't recall that operation." "You should," Jade replied simply. After the ceremony dissolved into awkward silence, a major confronted her in a hallway. "That mission was classified. You shouldn't be—" "I was there," she interrupted softly. "I held my captain in my arms while he bled out because command rerouted our extraction. His command." That night, a young intelligence analyst named Thompson stayed late, troubled by what he had heard. He dug into archived logs buried deep in the classified network. He found a redacted after-action report. Raven 12, a 6-person recon team operating behind enemy lines, ambushed, extraction rerouted mid-op under direct override, signed by then-Colonel Gregory. Status: total unit loss. No survivors. But at the bottom, something strange. One note: unverified survivor account. Nguyen, J. Tech Sergeant. Unreliable due to trauma. Thompson kept digging. An old technician remembered a woman crawling into base 2 days after the operation, half-burned, delirious, dehydrated, but carrying 6 dog tags in her fist. She had spoken of an order, of being left behind. She was debriefed. Then,
disappeared. The puzzle pieces slid into place. The woman they called a ghost, the one who never talked, the one who arrived before everyone and left after dark. She wasn't a technician. She was a ghost, yes, but of a forgotten battlefield, the last echo of Raven 12. And suddenly, the way she worked made sense. Her silence, her precision, the fire in her calm. She wasn't just another name on a schedule. She was a soldier who had been erased, a survivor who had been silenced. The next morning, General Gregory convened a private meeting. Base commanders, intelligence officers, senior staff, and Jade. The room was thick with tension. Gregory opened with controlled words. "I've reviewed what files are accessible. I don't recall issuing an abandonment. I trusted the decisions I made were necessary." Jade stepped forward, placing a charred object on the table. A dog tag, scorched black around the edges, the name barely legible, Martinez, Captain. "He saluted you before requesting medevac for our wounded. He died waiting." Then she placed a weathered notebook beside it. Its pages were stained, frayed, but meticulous. Names, blood types, last radio calls, casualty reports, all logged by hand in the middle of hell. She flipped through it. "Sergeant Williams took shrapnel shielding our radio, died calling for extraction that never came. Corporal Chen held position 6 hours with a collapsed lung. She died thinking help was on the way. Private Rodriguez, 19, bled out asking me to tell his mother he was brave. Specialist Kim, our medic, gave me his last morphine and died beside me. Private Thompson, he held my hand and made me promise to remember." Gregory's hands shook as he turned the pages. This is beyond detailed. She worked at the base, still showed up before sunrise, still signed off on system checks. But now, people looked her in the eye. They greeted her quietly, with respect. Invitations came in, speeches, memorials, ceremonies. She declined them all. "Let those who didn't return speak instead," she said, "through how we serve." One day, her locker was opened. Inside were items no one had ever seen. A red ribbon with Private Rodriguez's initials, a blood-stained patch from Sergeant Williams, a small coin from Corporal Chen, letters from grieving families addressed only to Jade, who stayed. She had been their living memorial for 8 years. Eventually, the base created a wall. No headlines, no press. Just a quiet stone carved with 6 names, the Raven 12 emblem, and the words, "They held the line." General Gregory paid for it himself. He also ensured the official record was amended, at last, to include the truth. One morning, Jade was gone, her desk empty, no farewell, only a note. "I'm not disappearing. I just needed the truth to stand. That was the mission. It's complete." They later learned she had transferred to another base, then another. Still early, still quiet, still serving. Still carrying the weight, so others don't have to. And every October 15th, someone places 6 small American flags at the memorial wall. No one sees who, no one needs to. Not everyone who stands silent is disrespecting authority. Some stand still because they once stood alone. The salute she refused wasn't defiance. It was remembrance. Sometimes the loudest truth is spoken in silence. And sometimes the people we overlook are the ones who held the line when it mattered most. Remember Jade Nguyen. Remember Raven 12. And remember, honor doesn't always wear medals. Sometimes it wears a uniform no one sees. I was the comms tech, she said. It was my job to record, even when no one was listening. Then she pulled out a transcript, a final radio exchange. Raven 12, to command. 3 KIA, 2 critical. Request immediate medevac, grid 41 SMB 12345. Combat ineffective, holding. Response? Redirect to grid 41 SMB 54231. Higher priorities elsewhere. Out. She looked up. That coordinate was 12 kilometers through enemy territory. We couldn't move. We didn't survive. I did. She stood. For the first time, her voice carried weight that silenced even stars. I'm not here to ruin your career. I don't want vengeance or apologies. I want names remembered. I want silence broken, because for 8 years, I carried them alone. Gregory stood slowly. For the first time in his decorated life, he raised his hand and saluted her. The officers around him followed, not out of protocol, but respect. Not to a general, to a ghost, to a survivor. Jade didn't return the salute. She nodded once, then turned away. Before she left, she placed the notebook and 6 dog tags on the table. They're not mine anymore. They belong to history.
2 years after the truth of Raven 12 was unsealed, a young cadet named Miles Darrow arrived at Base Echo Delta, a remote Arctic outpost known more for maintenance drills and radar sweeps than any real action. He was cocky, eager, and green. First in his class academically, but too loud, too fast, too sure of himself. On his second day, he found himself assigned to night shift calibration with a woman most of the base simply called Ma'am Jade. She's ex-tech, someone muttered. She's strict, doesn't talk much. Don't screw around with her. Miles wasn't impressed. When he entered the comms bay, he saw a woman in her early 40s, sharp eyes, gray at her temples, uniform perfectly pressed. She didn't greet him, just pointed at a loose fiber optic relay. "Fix it," she said. "No offense, ma'am," he replied, smirking. "But I rank top in diagnostics at the academy. I could probably teach this stuff." She looked at him. One long blank stare. Then start teaching. Relays waiting. He reached for the tools and misaligned a clamp. Nothing sparked, but the data light flickered red. She didn't scold him. She didn't sigh. She just took the tools back, fixed it in under 8 seconds, and handed them back. "Top of your class, huh?" It was the first time anyone had said that to him without praise. Over the next month, she didn't praise him once. She barely spoke. But slowly, Miles began to notice what others missed. She was the only tech who stayed after shifts to double-check every backup line, manuals open, logs in pen. She didn't rely on AI auto-calibration, even though it worked 99% of the time. She walked the perimeter every 3rd night, just to check the wiring in the cold. One night, Miles asked her, "Why do you do all this stuff no one notices?" She glanced at him, then back to her soldering iron. "Because I noticed." It happened during a snowstorm. The comms array blinked out, satellite link, dead, thermal surveillance, offline. The base commander was already prepping evacuation protocol when Jade cut across the room. "No, we're not blind. Manual fallback still possible. Darrow, come with me." Through a blizzard that buried their boots in seconds, they fought toward the east tower. Winds at 60 knots, visibility near 0. Darrow slipped once. Jade caught him by the jacket without a word. When they reached the tower, the power line was buried under 3 feet of ice. Jade dropped to her knees, hands working fast, as if her fingers knew the system by feel alone. Darrow tried to help. His hands shook. He was numb and panicking. She didn't yell, just looked him in the eye and said, "Your fear doesn't get to choose what happens next. You do." They got the line back. Comms lit green. Base reconnected. Evacuation canceled. The next day, the commander submitted a citation for commendation. Jade refused it. "It wasn't heroism," she said. "It was a broken wire. I fixed it." But for the first time, Darrow understood something deeper. He started reading up on her, quietly, through old logs, restricted reports, unofficial memoirs. The story of Raven 12, the erased mission, the girl who walked out of hell with 6 dog tags and never asked for anything. When he asked her about it, she only said, "They deserve to be remembered, that's all." He paused, then added, "Well, now you do too." She looked at him with that unreadable calm. "I'm still here. I don't need remembering yet." But word of Jade began to spread, subtly, quietly. In bases across the Arctic line, soldiers began carving the number 12 into their lockers, not as a symbol of loss, but vigilance. They whispered her name when comms fell and they needed calm. They quoted her during drills, "Fear doesn't get to choose." They followed her manual backups as gospel. She wasn't famous. She was folklore. One spring, a new Congressional Oversight Committee launched a formal inquiry into Cold-era covert operations. One name kept coming up from whistleblowers and anonymous testimonies: Nguyen, Jade. She was summoned to speak. She declined. Then the families of Raven 12 reached out, not to ask her to go, but to stand with her. So she agreed. In Washington, seated across from senators in polished suits, she wore no medals, no ribbons, just her plain uniform and the notebook, the same one she'd laid on Gregory's desk years ago. A senator leaned forward. "Miss Nguyen, what do you hope this committee achieves?" She looked up, steady. "Closure. For you? For them." She opened the notebook and began reading names again. This time, her voice didn't shake. When the session ended, one journalist asked, "Why didn't you speak up earlier?" She answered, "Because for a long time I thought survival wasn't the same as living. I had to learn that remembering isn't dwelling, it's honoring." She returned to Base Echo Delta, but something had changed, not in her, but in everyone else. Wherever she walked, soldiers nodded, not because they had to, but because they understood now. The girl who never saluted, she had taught them what true respect looked like. Years passed, wars came and went, technologies advanced. And one day, Jade Nguyen finally submitted her retirement papers. No press, no ceremony. She just handed them in and said, "It's time for others to carry the torch." But when she walked out of the base for the last time, something awaited her. 6 rows of soldiers in formation, young, old, different branches. Each held a dog tag replica. Each saluted. And at the center, a plaque. Raven 12, in memory and honor, with her name added for the first time. Tech Sergeant Jade Nguyen, the one who stayed. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She stepped forward. And for the first time in her entire career, she returned the salute. Not because it was expected, but because it was earned by everyone who had held the line with her. She lives quietly now. Small house in the mountains. Tends a garden. Volunteers with veterans who can't sleep at night. Sometimes cadets send her letters. She never writes back. But one day, a young recruit finds a small package on their bunk. Inside, a notebook, blank pages. The first line written in black ink. Record everything, even when no one's listening.